Hello and welcome to another 5 Minutes with Harold Feld, where we take insanely boring, incredibly wonky stuff and try to make it slightly less boring because this stuff is important. And today is extremely important because we have a major victory to celebrate. Chairman Janikowski at the FCC has announced that he is going to put forward a proceeding to reclassify broadband access as Title II service. This is something we've been, yes, what? Title II Lite, the telecommunications component, well, thank you very much, Mr. Ex parte Buzzkill. Let me see if I can explain that to people. All right. This is even more complicated than usual, but here's how it goes. This is still big, but it doesn't solve the open internet problem. It makes it possible to have open internet rules. Here's how this is going to work. Before the Comcast decision, the FCC put all of this broadband stuff into a box called Title I. That is to say, they said, yeah, there's telecommunications, moving information from one place to another, but there's also information processing, trying to, figure out all this computer stuff. So we're going to give you a choice between information service, which is something called Title I in the Communications Act, and telecommunications service, which is something called Title II in the Telecommunications Act. And we're going to let the broadband guys be in Title I, even though what they're offering has a Title I part and a Title II part. They did that in part because they said, well, we have something called ancillary authority in Title I that'll let us protect an open internet, protect consumers, do the stuff that we need to do. But there's all kinds of things that are in Title II that apply to phone companies, things, in fact, that don't even apply to phone companies anymore. So we'll put it in Title I. Everybody, especially the carriers, will be happy. Then comes the Comcast decision. The Comcast decision says, if you put things in the Title I information services box, then you're really not going to be able to do open internet. And in fact, from the way we read the Comcast decision, meant you're really not going to be able to do universal service reform to get it to be about broadband. You're really not going to be able to do a whole bunch of other stuff you want to do about cybersecurity, even transparency, consumer protection of other kinds. You're just not going to be able to get there under Title I ancillary authority, says the court. So what Janikowski wants to do now is essentially a legal reset. You know that time in 2002 when we moved everything over to the Title I box? Now we're going to declare a mulligan, and it's going to go into the Title II box. It's not going to mean a change in policy. Everything that we want in the National Broadband Plan about universal service, being for adoption, about recognizing the important role that the FCC has in universal adoption and protecting consumers in the broadband age, all of that remains unchanged, and in fact now is possible after the legal reset. On the other hand, a lot of other stuff that we did want about competition, things like line sharing, to go back to the rules we used to have in the 1990s that made it possible for there to be so many dial-up ISPs, those are still off the table. Nothing in the Title II reset, this Title II Lite, makes that happen, because the FCC is going to use a magic trick that Congress gave them in 1996 where, and this is going to sound really peculiar, Congress said in Section 10 of the Act, if you FCC think that you shouldn't apply one of the laws that we've told you to apply, because you FCC will know better about when not to apply something, you can forbear from applying it. So the FCC says we're going to forbear from applying everything except the basic, what's called 201, 202, everything has to be just and reasonable and not unduly discriminatory. Section 222, which protects consumer privacy, and Section 254, which protects, which makes universal service possible. So they're going to take comment on that. Then they're going to have to issue an order that actually does all of that. So it's going to be a three-step process. Probably going to take a couple of months. So What did we win today? Well, people are saying, well, we won a victory, we won a battle, we didn't win the war. But that understates what we did. If this was a battle, it was a battle in the same way that Iwo Jima was a battle, in the same way that the storming of Normandy was a battle. It was a battle that really turns the tide and makes a difference. Because if we didn't get this legal reset, if we didn't persuade Janikowski to stand up to the carriers, to take the netroot seriously, and protect consumers first, if he'd listened to the carriers and tried to do this in Title I, there's no way we could have protected an open internet. The FCC just wouldn't have had the authority to do it, which would have suited the carriers just fine. Once this happens, the FCC will have the authority to protect the open internet. But we're still going to have to fight to make this legal reset happen, and we're still going to have to fight even after it happens to get the right rules. So, yeah, it's a victory in a battle. It doesn't win us the whole war. We don't get to pack up and go home. But you know what? That's always going to be true. This is a big deal. This is a big win. And this is a win that wouldn't have been possible without the netroot stepping up. Because just last Monday, there was an article in the Post that said Janikowski was likely to go the other way. Everybody here stepped up. Everybody here ought to be proud. Everybody here ought to take today and celebrate a real win. And tomorrow, we can get back to work.